In his famous book, The Peloponnesian Wars, the Greek writer and historian Thucydides presents a very important conundrum of interstate relations. He talks about a Thucydides trap, where an emerging power becomes an important challenge to an established power. In his case, in his time, the emerging power was the city-state of Sparta, and the established power was the city-state of Athens. And since Athens felt its position as the dominant power in the region threatened by a rising Sparta, conflict between the two powers was inevitable. So this is what the classical Thucydides trap means. So if we apply that to the current situation, it has a lot of similarities. So the established power in the current world order is the United States of America, and the emerging economic and political and geopolitical power in the present age is the People's Republic of China. And according to Thucydides trap and its many adversaries and theorists, a conflict between China and US is inevitable. So from that lens, we need to see what kind of involvement and interest does America has in the region where China is most invested in, vis-a-vis its Belt and Road Initiative. So that region is basically the South Asian region, the Central Asian region, Middle East and East Asia. I am your host, Shahrukh Haider, and once again I present you the 35th session of the KIPs Distance Learning Program Current Affairs Newspaper Roundup session. The topic for today is America's vision for the South and Central Asian regions. So first of all, let's look at what America's historic interest has been in this region. So first of all, we've seen that ever since the close of the World War II and the recession of the power of the colonial empires and their withdrawal from the rest of the world, the British Empire, which was before the World War II the dominant power in the Indian Ocean region, handed its authority, its power and its strategic port of Diego Garcia to the United States, after which the United States became the dominant power in the Indian Ocean region. And ever since then, everything that has happened in the Indian Ocean region is to a large extent dictated by American foreign policy. American warships and its military and naval forces protect the historic trading lanes in the Indian Ocean region and provide an umbrella security to all American allies in the region. Furthermore, at least as far as 1979, American entanglement in the Afghan crisis, the Afghan Quagmire, first the Soviet Union invasion of Afghanistan and the Mujahideen Jihad of America and Pakistan, and then the global war on terror and the invasion of Afghanistan and the Taliban insurgency, and all of that, the US has had a long-standing involvement and interest in Afghanistan for nearly 40 years now, or even more than that. So that's an important historic interest of America in Afghanistan that is related to the very famous quote that Afghanistan is a graveyard of great powers. So the first great power to fall in Afghanistan was the Soviet Union, and then it was the United States in recent times. So that's how American historical interest in this region has been shaped. And finally, at least until 1979, Iran has had a very controversial and a confrontational actually foreign policy towards the United States, which is one of the cornerstones and has been one of the cornerstones of United States foreign policy in this region. And more recently, the United States' interest and strategic alignment with India in order to build India as a counterweight to China. So let's look at so we've talked about the historical interest, right? So let's look at how these historical interests have now translated into contemporary American interest in this region. Well, first of all, America is already to a large extent embarrassed at losing the war against the Taliban in Afghanistan, and they want to leave Afghanistan as soon as possible with the tail between their legs. But they can't really do that unless they are able to sort of bring a sustainable political solution in Afghanistan and withdraw their forces so that there is no civil war after America leaves, as there was when they left in 1990s. So that's also an important personal necessity for the election campaign of Donald Trump. Now that is because Donald Trump's foreign policy to a large extent has been a complete disaster, a failure. So at least Donald Trump wants to give a simple lollipop to some of its his electoral base, and perhaps the resolution of the Afghan crisis, which has been going on for nearly 20 years and has been a complete embarrassment for United States foreign policy and military. Perhaps its resolution could be a turning point for Trump's election campaign, which for now is going very poorly, and there are good chances that Donald Trump loses the American election for the president to Joe Biden, the Democratic nominee, of course. Secondly, in contemporary interests of America, one of the central point, the cornerstone of American foreign policy in the South and Central and East Asian region has been the containment of the economic and political rise of China. And that was most specifically seen when Obama, the former US president in 2013, announced the American pivot to Asia foreign policy, or also known as the rebalancing to Asia foreign policy, which envisioned the reorientation of American foreign policy from a complete focus on Europe and Middle East to South, Central and East Asia. Ever since then, America has done everything that it could without aggravating the situation or creating an escalation between China to try to undermine Chinese economic and political efforts to expand its hegemony and its regional influence all over the Asian heartland, which we have seen in the form of the Belt and Road Initiative, which interestingly was announced in the same year as the pivot to Asia policy by the United States was, which is the year of 2013. Moreover, US has also been grooming India to help it become a counterweight to China in the region, to thwart Chinese efforts to create dominance and hegemony over this region. India is becoming an important cornerstone of American foreign policy in this region. So, for example, in 2008, the United States and India signed a couple of important civilian nuclear deals, and strategic partnership was created in order to make sure that there is a clear message to China that India and United States are on one page when it comes to the Chinese influence in this region. And that was most specifically conveyed when there were a lot of joint military exercises between India, America, Australia, even Japan, known as the Malabar exercises, and other sort of military exercises and games in this region to sort of create deterrence for Chinese aggression against any American allies or American interests. Thirdly, the United States want to contain Iranian activities in the Middle Eastern region and prevent Iran from creating a security zone and a pro-Iran regional setup in the Middle East. So US has been doing that in multiple ways, especially recently when in 2018 the Donald Trump administration withdrew from the Iran nuclear deal, once again imposing damning economic sanctions on the Iranian administration and trying to put increasing pressure and creating a lot of escalation between Iran and US to push Iran to come onto the table and sign another more conducive deal that is more beneficial to US interests than it is to the Iranian interest, because the original Iran nuclear deal, Trump thinks, is much more in the interest of Iran than it is in the interest of America and its allies Saudi Arabia and Israel in the region. Secondly, the brutal murder of the Quds Force commander Qasem Soleimani is another example of how US is trying to undercut Iranian influence and Iranian activities in the greater Middle Eastern region to create its influence. And thirdly, United States has also conducted a lot of cyber and anti-state activities and covert attacks on Iran's strategic interests and strategic assets in collaboration with Saudi Arabia and especially with Israel. And finally, US has also been undermining Iranian partnerships and strategic alignments with other countries. So, for example, one of the primary reasons why the Indian administration withdrew from its investment and strategic partnership with Iran was because of increasing US pressure on India to abandon Iran. And since India did not want to alienate or abandon the United States by keeping its ties close with Iran, India sought and decided to completely abandon its relationship with Iran. And in similar ways, the United States has tried to undermine the Iranian administration by creating rifts between other allies